All right, it's 7 o'clock, and I would like to call the special meeting of Kimberley City Council for Monday, July the 8th to order, held here in the place called Kukumanum, which is the homeland of the Ktunaxa peoples. Councillors Cairns and McGuire are joining us via video conference this evening. Welcome, guys.
Thanks.
Maurice, do we have any late items?
There's no late items, Mr. Mayor.
Right, hearing none, can I have a mover to adopt the agenda? Councillor McBain moves and Councillor Dunneback seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right, short formalities tonight. First up, we have 3 items tonight. First up is a delegation. Jay McKean and Jason Williams will be presenting not in response, well, I guess in response to, but they're going to be talking about the Engage Kimberley summary report on gas stations and drive-thrus. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you for making some time for us this evening. We'll try and be as succinct as possible. We do have some thoughts that we'd like to share. I'm Jay McKean. I'm the president of the Jack Carter Automotive Group. I'm joined by my colleague, Jason Williams from Jaymont Development. I'm a business owner here in Kimberley. We've been in Kimberley for a short time. We came here in 2021. We purchased the old Chalet Chevrolet dealership. And for a short time, we ran our North Star Chevrolet operation from Kimberley. Unfortunately, we're a bit of a victim of COVID, and General Motors made a decision that due to supply chain interruptions and constraints, they could no longer support the Kimberley location. We condensed our location into Cranbrook, but just this past year, we've reopened that building, and we're doing so with a Yamaha power sports and marine operation. And it's that property that I wanted to share some thoughts with you on this evening. I have seen the report on gas stations and drive-thrus, and quite frankly, it's a good report. And it's very clear to understand the priorities as laid out in that report. We think that there's some other priorities that should be taken into consideration, especially given that one of the things on the survey that came through loud and clear was that Kimberley residents are looking for some certain things, a decrease in their residential tax, at the same time understanding that needs to come with an offset, which is an increase to the commercial tax revenue. And one that I found quite interesting was find appropriate land to accommodate growing businesses. And I think that those two things can be done while at the same time respecting some of the other priorities that your citizens identified in the survey. So I want to start, and I want to share some thoughts on gas stations and EV vehicles, because the EV landscape is rapidly changing, and I don't really think that the report was able to capture what's going on in that landscape. British Columbia has a provincial mandate that all new passenger vehicles sold need to be 90% EV by 2030 and 100% by 2035. So given that the average ownership of vehicle is 4.5 years, that means that most of the Kimberley residents and the Kimberley visitors will be driving EV within the next decade to decade and a half. We're seeing this supported through our knowledge of future product release, both in automotive, power sports, marine, and even bicycles. All manufacturers are planning to meet the goals of the province of British Columbia and the federal government. The big concern remains infrastructure. It's currently inadequate, and it's expensive to expand. I looked on my way to the meeting. Kimberley currently has 4 public level 2 chargers, all at 6.2 kilowatts. Most people in the room probably won't know what that means. What it means is that your average Tesla takes 10 hours to charge on that machine. So literally 4 people can take up 100% of the capacity of Kimberley's EV charging structure today. By comparison, our dealership in Cranbrook alone has more level 2s and also has a publicly available level 3 charger, one of only 4 in Cranbrook. As EV ownership expands, Kimberley residents could install level 2s at home. And I say could because what we're seeing is that not all homes, especially older ones, have enough electrical capacity. Travelers to Kimberley, however, are going to need level 3 chargers in quantity. Level 3s with their faster charging times are what is required to accommodate visitors and their short-term needs as they're in your town. Level 3s are costly in terms of dollars and space. An average level 3 charger is somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000, and that's just the unit itself. Never mind that the electrical work to connect it, and we're seeing that that actually is doubling that figure. These units by necessity are large. They're roughly the size of a refrigerator, so a bank of them takes up quite a bit of real estate. The industries that we represent are not counting on government bodies to cover this. Governments are simply under too much budgetary pressure. The entities that can make the dollar and land investment are those that can monetize the chargers, and the best equipped to do so are actually the current gas station companies. We know from our industries talking with theirs that they're anticipating a migration from gasoline sales to electric charging sales. And we're starting to see that in other communities. And the one that comes to mind as I'm a resident is Invermere. And if you think about Highway 95, right as you turn into Invermere, you've got a brand new Esso, and you've got a major bank of level 3 EV chargers. So that's what will be required in Kimberley. For Kimberley specifically, it would look that the existing gas stations do not have the real estate to put in these charger banks. And also looking at the desire from Kimberley to maintain their charm and character of the downtown core would make the most sense to try and concentrate these charging banks in some of the commercial nodes along the highway, preferably away from the picturesque center of town. Simply put, given that gas stations will be Kimberley's easiest and least expensive manner in which to improve its EV infrastructure, we think thought should be given to where they can be placed rather than an outright ban, which is based on today's perceived needs rather than anticipating tomorrow's needs. And my colleague would like to make a few comments on drive-throughs.
So yeah, just following up on that and keeping the EVs chargers outside of the downtown. One thing that's going to happen is that the quick service restaurants will fill or be complementary to some of these level 3 chargers where traveling people or residents are coming in, they're charging, they have a place to go to get a coffee or a sandwich, and that's what the quick service restaurants will be. So when we talk about quick service restaurants, that's sort of the brands that everyone recognizes that are out there. So they're going to be just filling an amenity gap, mostly for the tourism industry. That's the traveling families, the business, the working traveler that's coming in, sports teams that are coming in, prevents them from having to go back and forth with the team to Cranbrook and back. The other thing I want to emphasize with the national restaurants, I'll call them, is that these owners of these restaurants are usually local people. They own two to three restaurants. And once we finish the lease agreements and get them in place, all of our dealings do happen at that ground level. We're dealing directly with the local restaurant owner. So they do provide back to the community. There's programs you've probably heard of, the Smile Cookies campaign, Camp Day. All that money funds raised goes back right into the local community. And it's driven by the restaurant owners themselves. Interesting, I was coming in through Sparwood. We did a project there with a new gas station. The manager, I met him for the first time. He was so proud about the store that he opened. He had relocated, his family's moved, and they're now living in Sparwood. And he was telling me he opens the store at 5 in the morning and gets things going, works 7 days a week. So it was just kind of interesting. I heard that on the way up to Kimberley this morning. A bit about drive-throughs. There was talk about, from the accessibility standpoint, there's sort of, seemed like the survey pointed out, it was 50% in favor, 50% not, possibly some restrictions on the type of drive-throughs and whatnot. Yeah, we're. So yeah, safety with drive-throughs. So all of our, when you look at our sites now that are being built with the drive-throughs, they're all very well signed. You'll see crosswalks that'll be put in. The other thing that we will do is we'll provide a connectivity to the local pathway system so that if you are walking or biking, you can come up to there and then also safely get back into the pathway system. And I think that was about all. And then I'll let Jay finish off here just on the investment that is happening.
Thanks, Jason. One of the reasons in my opening comments where I really emphasized the point from your survey that talked about finding a proper location for expansion was the site that we're on is designated industrial. Okay. And so when we purchased that dealership just for the land and building, we paid, and this is a matter of public record, we paid $4.5 million for that land and building. And at the time, that was only represented 80% of the market value, as that land is actually somewhat compromised due to the activity of the Sullivan mine. And to be blunt, no matter who we put into that existing building from a tenancy standpoint, we cannot reasonably expect to collect enough rent to service the debt on that kind of an investment. Now, we're committed to remaining as part of the Kimberley scene, so we need to look at ways to have that space pay for itself. This means we will have to develop the vacant land that's on the site now to have the numbers work. Ironically, we need to spend money, more money, in order to get to a point of debt coverage. So given that the space is currently zoned industrial, we did have some discussions with various parties in the area, which lead us to believe that with the industrial designation, we're going to be limited to something like a self-storage facility or machine shops. So this is our plan B. Our plan A is what is being considered as part of your report. And that would be to allow for a commercial node along the highway following some rezoning. From Kimberley's standpoint, it would seem that such a development would be more beneficial and a better use of the space. And if you think of Marysville as the gateway to Kimberley, I'd argue that a commercial development is a much more welcome site as you enter the greater Kimberley area, rather than an industrial area, which they just simply don't have a lot of appeal to the tourism industry that Kimberley is attracting and hoping to attract more of. Really, that's the thoughts that we wanted to share. I thank you for allowing us the opportunity. I hope I kept under my time limit. And by all means, if there were any questions on any of our comments, I'd sure try and answer them.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jay. You were bang on.
Was that?
Yeah, the 10 minutes. Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions or comments for our delegation? Go ahead, Councilor McBain.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for presenting. So I assume you guys followed what happened here in the fall with the proposal for a zoning change to the land adjacent to where you guys are.
Yes.
Okay, so you understand some of the folks up here, our positions on what we looked at, or what I looked at was zoning for convenience of, and don't take this the wrong way, gentlemen like yourself who want to come in here and make some money, and I understand that. But we have a lot of people who have come here to town to work within what Kimberley has to offer already in the spaces that are available already, and have been quite successful at that. And we haven't had to lean on national chains or any of those types of things to keep our identity. And quite frankly, going on the identity part, you mentioned you're from Invermere. And don't take this the wrong way. We are not Invermere. And I, for one, have no interest in this town being like Invermere. And I'm not trying to sound adversarial here. Believe me, I'm not. I appreciate I really appreciate what you guys have done in making an investment into the vacant building. And I hope that it continues to be what looks like it's going to be a success. I really do appreciate that. With respect to the EV charging stations, I would actually argue that in a lot of ways, and we've tried to think about how we can develop those as well. And what you say is not wrong. It is expensive. Governments do move slowly. It's difficult to implement those things. But we view our downtown core as the area where we want people to be if they're charging a car and that type of thing, because that's, you know, where the core of our business is. That's where the small businesses owner who've tried to make a go at restaurants and other types of things are at. So for us, to me, that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense than down in Marysville at the very, very edge of town. So I really, really want to be clear that, you know, all the things that at least I discussed in the fall that had to do with zoning change for a development such as what you guys are, you know, at least initially proposing, it doesn't really sit well with me. You make absolutely valid points about us trying to diversify our tax base, and we're working at that. We're trying to provide services to those industrial areas to attract more industry to our town. And I'm willing to be patient to hope that those industries come. I hope, you know, that you guys will continue to explore options, you know, maybe that fit into that industrial space. I had one more point to make too, but anyways, I've talked enough. I'll let other people speak, but I don't want this to sound adversarial. I appreciate what you guys are doing. I appreciate you coming here and pitching this to us, but I do want to make clear that our identity, in my opinion, is much different than some of the other towns in our area. So I just don't want us to be pigeonholed into the same type of box as some other towns around here. Thanks.
Further comments, council? Or questions for our delegation? Go ahead, Councillor down the back.
Yeah, I also appreciate the presentation. I also appreciate and understand investing in a piece of property, but when you do that, you realize what the investment is going in and what you have. And I think I've been in that building lots, and it's quite large, and I think that there's lots of opportunity that building could be quite easily separated into multiple buildings, a collage that would support everything that you have going on there. We've got adventure bike riders that are coming over now by the herds. Great Creek Pass has been all fixed up. Rose Pass is now all cut. I'm constantly going back and forth and daily seeing a dozen riders at a time, which they're going to be coming to you guys for that. Yeah, the idea of having EVs, charging stations, I love the thought that somebody's actually finally thinking about it. But I think that said chargers should be placed strategically around our downtown core. So because this is Kimberley, like this is where everybody comes. They walk their dogs. They go grab a coffee. They go down to the flume. Or now down to the pump track, or hike up to the ski hill. This is where people have worked super hard to make. And we got new hotels, we got lots of new food in the plateau, and I think that we need to really focus on building what we have here and using the industrial zone for said industrial, so that the whole town can grow. Essentially, that's all I got to say.
Thanks, Councillor. Go ahead, Councillor Roberts.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Dunneback, just at the top of your head, just around the town area there, where actually would you put those? Just what piece of land would you put those things on? I need to ask. I don't expect you to tell me.
Yeah, no,
But
actually.
where is that land?
So, guys, rhetorical question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So I think the thing that I find most informative to me because I act as a representative of the community, not any particular special interest group. And when I look at this survey that everybody did, the number one main thing and reason for people to answer these questions was to attract and retain business that people could make a living wage. Didn't say where, but that was their number one choice. Their number one challenge was cost of housing. But when it came to whether or not we should be prohibiting things like gas stations and drive-throughs, it was 50-50. Not enough for me to choose one over the other. When it came to talking about what was the most important reason for that, the reasons were 50-50, 54-50 against. That's not enough of a mandate for me to choose. 50-50 for all of those on how we are going to regulate it and what style should we regulate. 50% yes, 50% no. And when you get right down to it, the regulations for drive-throughs with regard to what kind of services we should have drive-throughs, should it be banks or should it be places where there are handicapped people? It was 50-50. If you look carefully, it's all or none, all or none. All or none. And a 50% mandate is not enough for me to put my hand up and say, we need to ban things or we need to turn things away. And I appreciate what you're saying is we're not another community, but that doesn't mean that we have to strive and bend over backwards to be 100% different than other communities. Because there's just so many reasons that we need to do some things to stimulate the tourism opportunities, which is our future. We don't have a heavy duty major enterprise anymore. We have to depend on all the small businesses that we can get. And the edge of town is not a bad place to put things because literally the edge of town changes. You can tell there's building up in Lois Creek, there's building up on the ski hill, there's building down in Marysville. The edge of town moves, the edge of town changes. Where the trails are moves just beyond them. And we have to sort of think about it, I guess because I'm older and I've seen more of a change over time. I think that I can be a little bit more foresighted than some of you are being. You can't just put your foot down and say, "Nuh-uh, we're not doing that." It's just very I think it's not the smart move to make. That's my opinion.
Just to be clear, I'm not saying I'm not, but
Okay,
yeah.
yep. We'll hold that for future conversation, please. Thank you for the comments, Councillor Roberts. Go ahead, Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, so I think there's some confusion around the survey there. Question 3 and number 7. Both of those are asking whether you prefer to regulate these types of developments or whether you prefer to prohibit them entirely. So when you look at that, you have 95% of the people in this community wanting some sort of regulation, either prohibition or some sort of regulation. And if you go down to question number 8, it asks what type of regulations do you want to see? And in that survey question, only 12% of participants that they didn't want to see any regulation at all. So, and all
excuse
the
me,
other regulation.
Councillor
Yeah,
McGuire,
hello?
sorry to interrupt. We're asking questions of the delegation. We'll save the conversation
Yeah,
for the
I've got
next
a
item if
question.
we could.
Well, I've got a question, and I'm just pointing
Okay,
out that
go ahead.
the last councillors brought up these surveys, and the delegate did as well. So I think it's pertinent to clear up some of that confusion.
Yep, go ahead and ask the question.
Yeah, thanks. So similarly to the other comments that have been made, I would prefer to see tourists attracted to our downtown core and using that time to explore existing commercial zones. And my question to you is, with this zoning that you're currently under, you're under M1 zoning, and I think in one of the slides you mentioned that it's prohibitive. I'm just curious if you've looked at the new M2 zoning and considered fitting into that zoning, because I know that, at least for myself, I would support that type of zoning change.
Sorry, which was that, Councillor McGuire? The M2 zone?
Yep.
Yeah, To answer your question, I'm not familiar with the M2 zoning. Look, I'm not a developer, so I really don't know a lot of these things, but if you could expand on what M2 was, I could maybe share some thoughts as to whether there was something within those parameters that could make sense from our standpoint.
So let's direct that question to our planning manager. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think just to be brief, I think the M2 zone, council will recall that was recently updated just last year or so, some amendments to that zone where we recognize that both the current M1 zone of the site and the adjacent M2 zone lands, those zones were established, the regulations were established many years ago. And I think at the time staff recommended that both zones be updated and the regulations be updated, including the range of uses permitted to reflect where things are heading in the future and where they're at today, just to kind of modernize the language there. So the M2 zone was amended, was modified and kind of updated with a different mix of uses. It's generally a lighter mix of uses, but targeting at kind of
It's in industrial zoning.
still in industrial zoning,
Modified
but lighter, less objectionable uses, I guess, from a noise, odor, dust situation, and intended to try to help attract different kind of investment that we might have been looking at decades ago. So that might be more innovative uses, more small scale manufacturing, kind of craft industries. There's all kinds of new kind of buzz language around that stuff. Our core outdoors initiative in the region has identified that appropriately zoned properties would be helpful, and that was part of the initiative. There was a time when we developed a sun mine, and there was a real push for trying to maybe capture some of that. Some of the projects that have been approved in that new zone are, of course, everyone's familiar with the Stoke Juice facility that just was recently approved. Prior to that was the cannabis facility in there. So we've seen some good recent projects approved in that new zone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Troy. Go ahead, Councillor Cairns.
Thank you. I thank you, Jay and Jason, for your presentation. I would be there in person, but it came right at a family reunion time, so I'm joining from a truck in a campground. Do appreciate this, and you play an important role in our community and our future prosperity, and I want success for you and for Kimberley. You have a great location across from Marysville School, the daycare with Purcell Park behind, and are in our business park. The presentation focused very heavily on EV charging, and I just want to point out in terms of level 3 EV charging, we're not on a through route. High level EV charging is mostly appropriate for major highway corridors, not a destination like Kimberley. And here, in terms of the people who are traveling long distances to get here and then return home, they can charge where they are staying, or downtown is the place that we would like to see those EV chargers placed by unique amenities. And in terms of the business park itself, it's identified in our OCP for innovative and specialized uses to support diversifying our economy and living wage employment. And I'd encourage you to think about innovative development. There's a land tour October 5th as part of the CORE conference, where RecTech designers and manufacturers will be looking at location opportunities. And our mayor has pointed out that a lack of land is limiting getting the manufacturing off the ground. So there's opportunities there, and it's a really great location for it, and a potential mix with other uses as you've mentioned. In terms specifically of this use, our existing investors expect that we will diversify our economy according to our economic development policy and our industrial land use policy, and not simply intensify competition in those areas that are already well served, which your proposal does include a drive-through and the service station. EV is just one component of it. Our official community plan is our agreement with the community for shaping our future, and it's been affirmed through in-depth engagement and is supported by sustainable land use and urban design principles. And we need to move that forward. And our vision places us firmly on that path. Our priorities place us firmly on that path of sustainable development, which this proposal in its whole is not. So I'll leave it there. This is the type of development that communities are shifting away from, vehicle-oriented development. And I look forward to the opportunity to digging in more to the survey that was just completed, because I think there were some misinterpretations there that I think we need to open up and discuss as council. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
All right, thanks for the comments, Councillor Cairns. I think everybody's had an opportunity to voice an opinion. I will follow through with a couple of comments of my own. So first of all, just with respect to your last comment, Councillor Cairns, our single economic driver is tourism. If we did not have tourism in the town, well over half of the businesses we have would disappear tomorrow. And all of our tourism is traffic driven. It's rubber traffic to Kimberley. And that's not going to change because of where we are. I mean, that's just the reality of what it is we're dealing with. So I just want to remind council that we need to be cognizant of what our role is. And our role isn't to dictate what investment does or doesn't come into Kimberley. We welcome investment to Kimberley. If we don't, we're in big trouble on many, many fronts. And our role is to make sure that we provide staff with the guidelines. And it's not just the OCP, it also is our bylaws, our policies. There's a whole list of things through there that we provide guidelines for. And that's what businesses use to come in and determine whether or not they can or want to invest in the community. And should a particular type of investment not fit, every investor has the opportunity to come and present to council or to apply for a development variance and come to council to make their case on why that is a good thing for Kimberley. And as a council, we need to have open minds and stay objective about the things that we're looking at. Otherwise, we're not going to have investors wanting to invest in Kimberley, whether we're talking commercial, industrial, or of any other kind. Investment needs predictability. And as a council and as a staff and with our regulations, we need to stay predictable. They are ever changing. There is work that we do on these bylaws and the policies all of the time, and they continually need to be updated. So with that, I want to thank you gentlemen for coming and talking to us tonight. And we will chat again, no doubt.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, we have, council will recall, several weeks ago, we had the staff report that came forward with some recommendations on the gas station and drive-throughs. At that time, we deferred the conversation and the decision on that to a later date, and that later date is tonight. So you will see that in the staff report of the report, the agenda for tonight is simply the staff report that was there a few weeks ago. There isn't anything new that's been added, correct, Troy?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, so it simply was deferred, and the deferral is coming back tonight. And the motion on the floor is that council directs staff to prepare zoning amendments and policy towards prohibiting new drive-through services while allowing existing drive-throughs to continue as non-conforming until transitioned to other uses. So that's on the floor. It's already been moved and seconded. I'll open the floor for discussion. Go ahead, Councillor McBain.
Yeah, I guess I just kind of reiterate my position that I had when we discussed this. I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. Is I really struggle with outright bans or prohibiting, and I much prefer the route of taking things, providing regulation and taking things on a case by case basis. It's just my preference. you never know what's, as you said, Don, you never know what's going to come through the door. And, we're always should be willing to listen to see what kind of proposals are. I mean, there were, some good points made within the survey about, certain folks within the community that, drive-through services are, very beneficial to them. With respect, I guess the only thing I will say with respect to gas stations, again, I don't like to go as far as prohibiting, even, new gas stations. My personal opinion, just as a resident, if I can put on my citizen hat, is I feel like I think we've got enough gas stations as is. But if I was the one crafting this bylaw and I'm get to weigh in on it, I really try to steer away from the word prohibited. I much prefer regulation. So
Thanks.
that's it for me.
Who's next? Any further comments? Go ahead, Councillor Cairns.
Thank you. So I just want to touch on some of just walk through the survey results, the summary a little bit. Significant.
Yeah. So Sue, yeah, please be brief on that because we've all read them.
Right. So significant staff time has gone into last year's public hearing, the petitions, the survey, engagement with constituents, and providing professional expertise and reflections on our OCP. And this has been referred to others as well, including the Accessibility Committee that's doing great work. And the Accessibility Committee, clearly did some nuanced thinking on this. They note that drive-throughs could be helpful for those who drive, but many with disabilities don't drive. And this fits with my own experience with my family. My mom was in a wheelchair for 20 years. My dad used a walker, and my sister used a wheelchair for a year. And what made a community accessible for us were wheelable sidewalks, curbs, doors, safe crosswalks, friendly, helpful people who didn't mind slowing down a bit. And that ability to go inside businesses and wheel through town, that was a chance to visit and be included. Drive-throughs don't provide that, and they aren't accessible to those who don't drive. And they're hard to get past when you're in a wheelchair or a scooter. Drivers tend to be distracted with their food and they don't expect pedestrians in their way. To quote the committee, wheelchair users and children are less visible from a vehicle, and the potential for conflict increases with vehicle-centered development. Increased drive-through traffic would negatively impact already strained accessibility. Another quote from the committee directly was, decreasing vehicle centricity increases accessibility for everyone. Delivery and curbside pickups better supports accessibility for all, and that Kimberley businesses have been great at working with people on this. On gas stations, new gas stations, were noted that that there's no full service gas stations in Kimberley. However, new gas stations don't provide full service. They are automated, more automated, not less automated. And the committee noted that there should be accessibility standards for gas stations so that wheelchair users who drive are able to fill their own vehicle. So I wanted to highlight that because there's a perception that drive-throughs increase accessibility, and that's not what the Accessibility Committee said. And then in terms of interior health, they commented on our OCP priority of protecting the environment for future generations. And the comment that they made is reducing dependency on cars to reduce fossil fuel use is something we do for a safe climate for future generations. And it also improves air quality, road safety, social connection, and well-being. Communities today attract based on their walkability and bikeability as healthy communities. Let's strive for that. And the survey summary in terms of economic development priorities, what was noted in the survey was that jobs that earn a livable wage was number one, visual appeal, vibrancy, sustainability, aligned development with community strengths and values. And the biggest challenges that were identified were housing, land for business expansion, labor shortage, and the labor shortage is tied to a lack of housing and living wages. Land is needed for business expansion, for living wage jobs that allow us to diversify beyond the service sector and diversify our tax base.
That it?
I'm going to explain what I would support moving forward with. So what I'm looking at is that I would support limiting drive-throughs to their existing locations and capping it there. It's an existing pattern of land use, and it provides options for customers as we strive to reduce our vehicle-oriented land development. So that would be option 3 in the report. In terms of gas stations, the majority of survey respondents want to prohibit new gas stations largely because of environmental implications, health risks, decarbonization trends, and oversaturation of the local market. I would add in there, consider the cost of remediating contaminated soil of former gas station sites, and that Kimberley has 5 gas stations, and that the availability of land is identified as a challenge to economic development. We shouldn't be dedicating any more land to this purpose. And in response to Sandra's comment about where could EV chargers be located, gas stations are going to need a transition out, and this would be, some of those gas stations would be potentially good locations if they're close to town. So to sum up, I'm going to provide that my piece on this is that I support recommendation 3. Council direct staff establish regulations for new drive-throughs, limit to.
We've got
existing
a motion
locations.
on the floor, Sue.
Okay, and then the
Well,
second is prohibiting.
Depending on what
new
happens
gas
with that
stations.
motion, we will entertain another one.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything further?
That's all.
I guess I have a question for council, and that is, what's our goal here? What are we trying to achieve by banning gas stations and drive-throughs? It's unclear to me what the goal is. Comment? No. I'm not looking at you specifically, Jason.
Yeah, I don't think I said that.
That's the motion on the floor.
Right.
And I'm speaking to the motion on the floor. It's like, what's our overall goal? I guess I'm trying to understand that. I guess, okay, we'll take that as a rhetorical question for now. I think I'd like to remind council that we already have the hammer on all of this. If the bylaws have a use case, it doesn't come to council. If there is no use case, it must come to council, whatever that is. And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking it's redundant. Bringing in any special rules surrounding drive-throughs and gas stations, we already as a council are going to have those come before us in any event. And putting an extra layer of bureaucracy in there, doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I think staff time can be better used, quite frankly. I would also like to say that, as a council, we deal with conflicting priorities all the time. In fact, that's why we're here. If the policy manuals and the bylaws and everything else could run everything, we wouldn't need to be here. The fact is they don't. They're the best guess at what we have based on history and what has been brought to us before. But as you see, we get variants coming on all of these things frequently. And that's our job, is to take a look at the variants and see whether or not that's in the best interest of the community. If it is, we go ahead. If it isn't, we don't. But with respect to specifically the gas stations and the drive-throughs, we already control that. If a particular proponent for whatever the development is decides that it's not a use case that's in there, however, I think it's the right thing to do or where I want to invest my money, they'll come before council and make their case. But in any event, it comes through us. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, and I think, Mr. Mayor, I think we're in agreement there. Like I just really struggle with the word prohibited. And, you know, I'm much more willing to slog through on a case by case basis, proposals. I mean, to me, again, my own personal thing. Yes, I don't see Kimberly needing these types of services. And I use the word needing. Yeah, I really want to stress that. Sometimes they can be nice to have, but needing. But yeah, I struggle with just trying to put something that's outright prohibitive in there. It just kind of goes against the kind of the fabric of my being.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thanks for the comments. Councillor Roberts, go ahead.
Oh, just one thought on that with regard to the fact that there's already that supplementary control over that. Really, this situation, rather than what they want to put on that land, is whether or not we are prepared to create a commercial zone there. And I mean, all these years, we've had that zone there where we've had commercial vehicles sold back and forth beside each other for years. And they've allowed that to happen and called it something else. You know,
So for clarity, we're not talking about any proposed development. We're talking about development in general.
yes, and I appreciate that. So I think my point is just that. If we're going to like cut back to the fact that this is an added layer, then really this is not the issue of the day, really.
Well, I mean, it's impossible for us to determine what we do and don't want at any point in time, and totally counterproductive to take that approach.
And I would also add that if an investor comes to town and feels that they see a market that none of us see, that's their dime. And if they can make it work for themselves, that's awesome. And if they can't, then they're going to move down the road.
Yeah, fair comment. Thank you. Go ahead, Troy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just take a minute, if I may, to try to add some clarification to the I guess the question that's been put before council and the options that have been presented in that staff report. I mean, I think the discussion so far tonight and really all of the other meetings that this sort of wider policy issue has been brought up, whether it's been because of a specific application or just otherwise. You know, from my perspective, I think we're hearing loud and clear from the community that there's a desire to kind of improve our approach to this. You know, so staff laid out 4 different options for how to proceed on improving the regulation and the management, setting the expectations for gas station and drive-through proposals. Staff did recommend the strongest, boldest approach. And I think what I'm hearing around the table is the majority of council probably doesn't support that bold approach. That's just fine. Staff makes recommendations all the time that council doesn't always agree with. But I just want to make sure it's clear that there's 3 other approaches there that we're asking council to give us some direction. We see the need, and I think council sees the need to be more clear and set clearer expectations for these proposals and other land use. I mean, we, as the mayor points out, we go through that all the time. We just went through a major exercise of a small scale multi-unit housing amendments, the housing availability, affordability amendments 2 years before that, the M2 zone amendments that we did last year that we spoke about earlier. What we're doing there is trying to improve the regulation, trying to set clearer expectations so that when investors, new or existing, they have an understanding of what council, what community expects for that development. So, you know, if it's fine if council doesn't support staff's recommendation for the stronger, bolder action there to prohibit both uses. There's 3 other options there that are put forward, and that's what we're seeking direction from council to give us that, so that we can provide direction and clarity to applicants when they come forward, when they reach out as a potential investor, when they've already made a purchase and they want to understand what the community's expectations are. So it makes our job a lot easier when we can say, yeah, we're talking about a zoning regulation that was approved in the last year, not something that was approved 30 years ago, right? So, so it's fine if the motion on the table isn't approved, but I hope that there's another option presented and put forward.
Thank you for that, Troy. So just to be clear then, what we're talking about, let me see if I get my thoughts kind of square here. So right now, within the zones, the zoning, whether, commercial M2, M1, If a use case does not exist there, what is the recourse for an investor that may wish to zone for that, but the use case is not there?
Well, I mean, I think we have a perfect example where there's a current application to rezone the property. There's two aspects: redesignating the property in the official community plan from industrial to commercial, and rezoning the property. Now, that's in the context of, we've just gone through a similar proposal that council has denied. And there's been a lot of discussion around, you know, it's warranted that those rules be looked at and considered. What does the council want on behalf of the community for these kinds of proposals moving forward? So whichever option council picks of options 2, 3, 4, or 5 in the report, we will bring back some proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw. You know, we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. We've done a little bit of work on that in the past, given the previous proposal and the other work we did with M2. But you know, this conversation tonight has been, you know, as part of that. There's really great feedback and discussion going on. We can use that to kind of craft up some options for council to consider to clarify that language. So it may be amendments to, you know, all of the commercial zones, all of the industrial zones. It might, you know, I don't know what exactly that will be in the end, but that's what we're seeking council's general direction on those, you know, so that we can, you know, get those back in front of council. There will be a public hearing required for those regardless. You know, just like, I mean, any zoning amendments that don't involve just purely housing will require a public hearing. So there'll be more opportunity for community input as well, to make that clear.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that feedback, Troy. So again, just to be clear, if we go forward and bring in specific regulatory pieces, regulations, whether it's for drive-throughs or gas stations, then that becomes a use case with those regulations as part of it.
Yeah, I mean, what we'd likely look at is what are the range of uses in some of those existing zones? Should those be adjusted? Should those be modernized? And then with that, is there different regulations that we should look at? Should we strengthen? Should we, you know, however that looks like, you know, and those can be the traditional, you know, building height, setbacks, site coverage, all that stuff.
Specifically about gas stations and drive-throughs.
Well, yeah, so we would look at, you know, which zones are they allowed in now? We know it's only the C3 zone, not allowed anywhere else. So should it be allowed in other zones or not? You know, and if they are allowed, or where, you know, or where should they be allowed? Should we recommend pre-zoning certain areas or whatever? Like, you know, there's a number of ranges on there, but what we're trying to get is, again, back to the 4 options in the staff report. Option 5 is the stronger, bolder recommendation that council made, or that staff recommended. The option 2 would be the lightest or the softest approach, which is just, you know, establish some regulations and you know, bring back some options for council to consider. Option 3, option 4, those are hybrids or variations. So one is stronger on drive-throughs, and the other is stronger on gas stations, I guess, right? So, and you know, again, we get that the word prohibits not you know, really well liked, but that was the best term we could come up with to kind of indicate that. So it doesn't have to be a full prohibit. It might be just, you know, allowed under, you know, fairly strict requirements or conditions, or it could be, you know, allow under fairly wide open requirements and regulations.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to simply put, and Troy kind of touched on it. I support the option 2. I like that approach. It just, you know, it gives you guys an opportunity to you know, see what the latest and greatest is out there, Troy, and propose that to us. So that would be my.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor first that we have to deal with. So why don't we do that now? Go ahead, Woody.
I was going to call the question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor McGuire has suggested we call the question. So we will call the question. So the question on the floor, do we need to reread that? Hang on. Yeah, I'm on the other response options. So go ahead, Troy.
So the motion that was made last meeting. All right, just want to make sure. Yeah, the motion that was made last meeting and then it was subsequently deferred to this discussion is that council directs staff to prepare zoning amendments and policy towards prohibiting new drive-through services while allowing existing drive-throughs to continue as non-conforming uses until transitioned to other uses.
Okay, so that's the question we're calling. All in favor of that motion? Councillor Cairns is in favor. That motion is defeated. We hear another motion. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Yeah, I would move that, I can read it out too, that council directs staff to prepare zoning amendments and policy towards establishing regulations for new drive-through services, including their location, type of drive-through, et cetera. And B, establishing regulations for new gas station services, including their location setbacks, et cetera.
Seconder? Councillor Dunneback seconds. Further discussion? Is your hand up, Woody? No. Sue, is your hand up?
Yes, my hand is up because I wanted to respond to the question earlier around why are we doing this? And Troy responded there, but I do think it's really important to emphasize that we need guidance up front to set clear expectations and to be strategic about achieving our vision and community priorities, and provide certainty on the goalposts and attract and expand aligned investment. We have key community priorities. If we're not actually doing this proactively, then we're letting others decide our future. And I personally don't want to be in a position where we're doing this on a regular basis. I want guidance to be clear and upfront, and that is what investors expect. Both existing and new ones, and investors include everyone, all our constituents here. So I wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. To be clear, Sue, the reason for the question about the goal had to do specifically with the motion toward gas stations and the drive-throughs. Thank you for the comments. Okay, last word to Councillor McGuire.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that these are recommendations to allow staff to put some time into this and come back with some recommended regulations. It's not a commitment to go forward with those regulations. And where I'm not clear on whether I support the regulations at this point, I am clear that I support allowing staff to do what they have requested and provide us with some regulatory options.
Yeah, no, thanks for that clarification, Councillor McGuire. This will be a staff report that comes back for council consideration. Yep. Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. All right. Thanks, council. Next up, we have the 2024 by-election appointments of the Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officer. The motion on the floor is that Maurice Leroux, Corporate Officer, be appointed as Chief Election Officer pursuant to the Local Government Act. Moved by Councillor McBain, seconded Councillor Roberts. Any discussion? Did you have any comments you wanted to make?
My only comment is after the appointment, what happens is it starts the clock ticking. So I have to call the election within 80 days. So in my pre-appointment calculation, I determined that the general voting day for the 2024 by-election to fill one vacant position for a council member will be September 21st. And we will have two advanced voting opportunities on September 11 and September 18.
Great, excellent.
And the nomination, so I'm working on the guides for candidates. And that should be available within the next 2 weeks, and it's going to be on the website.
Awesome.
So
Good work, Maurice. Thank you very much. As if you didn't have enough to do, we now have another election. Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Next is that Vicky Lucas, Deputy Corporate Officer, be appointed as Deputy Chief Election Officer pursuant to the relevant section of the Local Government Act. Councillor Roberts moves and Councillor McBain seconds. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. And finally, pardon me, that in consideration of the additional duties that will be required by these two fine folks, that we waive kind of normal policy surrounding normal working hours, and that those extra hours be banked in accordance with the city policy for overtime. And that secondly, we waive the annual maximum amount of time in lieu of overtime, as it's expected to be fairly significant. Paraphrase. Thanks, Councillor McBain. Second, Councillor Dunneback. All those in favor? Motion is carried. All right, that's it. Last agenda item, move to adjourn. Councillor Roberts moves, and of course, Councillor Dunneback seconds. All those in favor? Motion is carried. We're done. Thanks, folks.
Interesting.